Hey, good evening. It's Wednesday, April 19th, and welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. So cool to have you along tonight. Got painted buntings at the feeder tonight. Maybe I'll get a picture for you someday, but they're just gorgeous little birds. Anyway, tonight I want to talk about self-talk. I did a couple of videos on this a couple of years ago, but I haven't talked about it in a while, and it's really important because self-talk is the most important conversations that you and I will ever have. And yet probably our self-talk is something we give the least amount of thought to. We just have these rambling conversations in our mind, and we actually think that no one else hears. We think we have these conversations and no one else is privy to them, understands what's happening. But that's not true. God is a part of every single conversation, self-talk conversation that you and I have. It doesn't matter whether we quote-unquote invite him or not. He is there. If you read the first 6 verses of Psalm 139, you see that God knows every thought that we have, every word that we speak, even before we speak them. He is always with us. He never walks away from us. He's always there. So these conversations that we have, these crazy, wild conversations, whether they're tame, whether they're angry, whether they're violent, whatever they are, it's not simply going on and contained in my head or contained in my heart. It is also a conversation that God is a part of. And he's hearing every thought, every word, every detail. He knows them. Now that could either be something that is terrifying to us, and maybe in some ways it should be, but it also should be something that's a great comfort to us. But the one thing I want to stress here, it doesn't matter whether or not you want God to be part of that conversation. He is. If he's not a part of every conversation you have with yourself, then he's not God. He's not who he represents himself to be. He is much different than that. Because he represents himself to be always everywhere. Always with us, knowing every thought. So our self-conversations, our self-talk, they're big deals. They're important for us. But it's one of the key ways that somehow we manage to ignore God and think we can turn him on and off like we do a switch. We can't. And that is such a huge, huge blessing. Proverbs 14:8 says this: "The prudent understand where they are going, but fools deceive themselves." That applies to this issue of self-talk. If we're wise, we understand the nature of the conversations that we're having. We get it. We understand we're interacting with God, and that following him, honoring him, is going to be the best path. But if we deceive ourselves, that's what fools do. Fools are people who live as if there's no God. You can be a very intelligent fool. Fools are people who live as if there is no God. If we live as if God is not a part of our conversations, we live like a fool. Let me say that again. If we live like God is not a part of every conversation we have, then we are living life like a fool. Now, an example of this is found in Luke's Gospel in chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. And it's interesting enough that it's talking about a rich fool. And just a quick summary, this is a man who has a great crop, has an abundant harvest. He has a ton of money, more than he ever imagined that he would ever have. And so he asked himself the question, self, What am I going to do with all this money? I know. I'll build barns and houses and storehouses for all this grain that I've collected, and then I'll be on easy street. I will take life easy. I will eat, drink, and be merry. Because I have so much money stored up for myself, I'm secure. And God comes to him in his self-talk that he thought was private, just him and himself and whoever else, lamppost, whatever, the barn, whatever. And God comes to him, interrupts him in the middle of this talk and says, "You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. And then who will get all your stuff?" Our self-talk is important. And this is not a matter of being good or bad or checking things off on a list. This is just accepting reality. God is a part of every conversation that you have and that I have. What a beautiful thing to teach our children. What a beautiful thing for us as husbands and wives to understand. I'm not having these conversations in isolation for anyone else. God is always a part of them. Let me read the proverb again. The prudent understand where they are going. The prudent, the wise, understand the nature of their self-talk. Is this talk going to lead me towards honoring God or lead me away from him? But the fool deceives himself. God's not a part of this, or if he is, I can ignore it. This is a huge, huge issue for us. And it's one of the reasons I think God seems so distant from us. Because we think we can have these conversations that God's not a part of. We can even have a conversation where we doubt him, as if he's not there. I wonder if I should obey God. Maybe God, maybe not even real. And God is right there with you. See how foolish that is. I talked earlier about how this can be something that can be disturbing or a blessing. And here's it. If you want to understand the mercy and grace of God in its fullest, in some ways, the fact that I can have these conversations with myself all the time, as if God doesn't exist, and he still loves me and cares for me, and I'm still here breathing, I'm still vertical. That's an example of the wonderful, glorious mercy and grace of God. Perhaps there's no clearer example of Psalm 103. God does not treat us as our sins deserve. Well, my self-talk deserves a lot of really bad things, and God is merciful and gracious to me. So think about this. Think about your self-talk. God is part of it. He's there. Stop deceiving yourself as if he's not there. Don't live like the fool who pretends there is no God. Live like the wise person, that God is with you, there to love you and care for you and nurture you and bring you into all the fullness and wonder this life has. So let's not ignore him in our self-talk. Let's embrace him. And our self-talk will wind up being conversations that will truly change our lives. And that's the thought for this night. Again, I'd love some thoughts. Maybe this is spurs some thoughts on your part. Give me some feedback. This is such an important cornerstone for us. God is a part of every thought and conversation we have. And that's such a huge blessing to us. Again, thanks so much for being here, and maybe we'll talk more about this tomorrow, especially if I get some comments and feedback on it. I will. I may give it some more thought. But anyway, thank you for being here. It's just such a blessing to be here. Thank you. Lord willing. Thank you so much for watching. It is such a huge encouragement.